about 20 minutes to talk about that because it's fairly kind of long subject. And even before talking about the Sega Saturn, I need to talk to you about what happened before that in the market and why the Saturn actually came to be designed in this way. So first, this guy is Tom Kalinske, who's actually used to be a former executive at Mattel. And he was credited to be one of the person who actually transformed the toy business of Mattel from like the Barbie doll to be what we know was to be a very small business before, and to turn it into a multi-billion selling toy brand. And so he was one of the architects of that transformation. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for us, he decided he wanted to be chairman of the company, but somehow he couldn't actually achieve that dream because of the rivalry inside the company. And he actually resigned from Mattel at some point, decided to do a small venture for a couple of years in the UK, and then took a break after having some significant profits in the late 80s, and he decided to go for vacation in Hawaii. And when he was in Hawaii, he actually met up with Nakayama-san, who was one of his former acquaintances from the US, who he was actually meeting with for a number of projects because Mattel was also in some electronics. And this guy, Nakayama-san, was actually working for Sega Corporation of America. And Sega was a very small company in the 80s. They were making a few home systems, but they were not selling very well. And the main brand in the home entertainment system was Nintendo. As you know, with the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. And Nakayama-san was actually interested to hear that Tom was available and free for a new adventure in a corporation. So he asked him, Tom, if you're interested, I'd like to show you some very exciting stuff, and why don't you come back, with me in Tokyo, and I will show you what we're working on. And Tom accepted and went to the Tokyo offices of Sega and went through the labs, and that's where actually he saw for the first time the MegaDrive, or the Genesis, depends where you lived, but it was a different name, but it was the same console. And it was one of the earliest 16 bits console available. It was very powerful compared to the 8 bits available on the market at the time. And Tom was very impressed by it. But unfortunately, this console was not selling very well, neither in Japan nor in the US, where it has just been started selling. And Nakayama-san took the opportunity to ask him, Tom, are you interested to take the American business and to lead this to become more successful? And Tom accepted. And very soon after that, he was on his way back to the US in the offices of Redwood Shores in California. This office still exists. You can look on Google Earth if you're interested. But it's no Sega anymore. And he decided he was actually to take over Michael Katz's leadership, who was previous leader of the American business. And Michael Katz was also a former executive from Mattel. So they knew each other, and Michael had some good ideas on how to market the MegaDrive on the American markets, and they had this kind of campaign on how to kind of ridiculize Nintendo. That was actually starting from Michael Katz's generation. But he wasn't selling that well either, so while I think he had some ideas, he was not able to meet the expectation of Nakayama-san. Actually, he asked him to sell like Yakumandai of MegaDrive. So 1 million units, and he would not even be able to reach like half that number. So for him, he thought it was impossible. So Tom came in, and Tom had a number of ideas on actually transform the business and to change the way they would sell the MegaDrive. But he saw that the ideas were so radical that he needed to go back to Japan and actually explain those ideas to the management in Japan in order to have them accepted and to move ahead with his plan. And his ideas were actually in about like five different points. So he met with Nakayama-san there, and you can imagine like if he was inside the room with a bunch of executives from the Sega Japan Corporation, and his plan was about first like the way you sell the MegaDrive in terms of pricing. He was saying like it was more than $200 at the time in the US market, and he thought it was too expensive to reach like mainstream audiences. So therefore, he recommended to decrease about like $50 the price of the MegaDrive, the Genesis, in order to increase its sales. Second thing, you can see here it was actually sold with a game called Altered Beast at the time, and Altered Beast was a game in which you were playing a human who was like fighting the undead, killing ghouls, and transforming yourself into a werewolf and whatever, fighting like demons and so on. And Tom's take on this was that this may not be the most appropriate game for the US market. Because you have this kind of really conservative Christian communities sometimes in the US, and who would not recommend their kids to play these kinds of games. So we thought, like, maybe this is a good game in Japan, but in the US it's not really fit for the market. So he said, like, we need to change that. One more thing, he said, like, you need to make more games for Americans. And we all know nowadays that sports games are extremely important in the US. For every console launch, you see that they always have to come with a number of sports games, because there's still a lot in the US, more than anywhere else. So his point there was, like, you should actually have some home development in the US for making games for American gamers, such as sports games and stuff like that. So we wanted to have additional funding for that kind of initiative in the US. On top of that, Sonic was about to come out, and he was interested to actually use it as a promotional pack to sell the Mega Drive or the Genesis together instead of Ultra Beast. And so he wanted to have this as a way to penetrate the market more easily. And finally, he wanted to have the approval of Sega Japan to be very much aggressive against Nintendo and ridiculize them even more than Michael Katz did. So he really wanted to actually bleed them in every way possible in the communication. So that was his kind of 5 points that he stressed when he went to meet Nakayama-san. And after the meeting, after his presentation, like, there was a lot of discussion in Japanese in the room, and he didn't understand what was happening, but he could get the feeling that it wasn't going that well. And he was actually right, because in the end, Nakayama-san actually told him, so Tom, thanks for your presentation, we appreciate what you did, but we can't agree with anything that you're saying. First, we're not going to sell the hardware cheaper, because we already are making a very thin margin, and there's no way we're going to actually sell that loss. You want to have Sonic, but Sonic is going to be a huge profit maker for the company in terms of software sales. There's no way we're going to give it to you for free at where is the system, so you can forget about that, and so on. So in the end, he was very frustrated. Of course, he wanted to change things the way they were done in the US, but he couldn't because of the management in Japan. So he was thinking, well, it's going to be actually my shortest job ever. I'm going to come back and resign and do something else in a couple of months. But as he was exiting the room, Nakayama-san actually grabbed him and said, "Look, Tom, we all think you're crazy. We all think that what you said is not going to work. But we hired you to make changes. Do it, and I'll take care of the rest." And with this exchange, with this last-minute blessing, Tom was able to actually go ahead and make the changes he wanted, all the 5 points I mentioned. And the changes in the market were actually incredible, because in a matter of a few years, the Mega Drive, like the Genesis, was actually able to be on par in terms of market share with the Super Nintendo. That came actually later. And you can see here in the blue part is actually the sales overseas, including with UH, which is the main market. And in red, the sales in Japan. And you can see that the blue bar for the Super Nintendo and the Genesis are actually about the same size. They finished on the same number of units. While Sega was a very small company, you have to remember it was basically an underdog in a way. Then, so after this kind of very successful venture with the Mega Drive in the US, not so much in Japan, 93 came very fast, and it was an age of transformation in the industry, because a number of competitors were coming on the market. They wanted to take over that kind of huge market that was going to be the video games market in the future. And you had companies like Atari with the Jaguar, you had Commodore with the CD32, and you had especially probably the biggest threat of all was the company led by Trip Hawkins, which was the 3DO. 3DO was a system that was devised to be a standard, a new standard in the console business, where anybody could make the 3DO. You would have a license to make the hardware, and they would be compatible with each other as long as you were designing it following the license. And so you had Panasonic making it, but you had also Victor and JVC, and so they would actually make their own 3DO versions, based on that principle. And Trip Hawkins was somebody really highly regarded in the industry, because he was the former founder of EA, Electronic Arts, one of the most successful publisher in the US, and he was very much seen as a visionary person, and he was really seen as somebody who was going to disrupt the business. So Sega, not only Sega, probably other companies as well, but they saw a real threat there. And when Nakayama-san, with a couple of team from the Japan side, came to the US early '93 to discuss the situation with the people in the US. because the US market, as you understand, was their main market nowadays. That they had to protect the US market at all costs. And they decided, actually more like Amazon decided that, well guys, you have to launch a new console by the end of '93. And we already have something ready for you. It's called the Project Neptune. And you have now a couple of months to get ready for the commercialization. That's it. It was all decided. They had, Tom and his team in the US had no say as to how they were going to do it. They had to accept the proposition because the threat there was that if 3DO managed to actually build enough market share, it would be too late for Sega to come back later and regain that gap that they had missed in the first place. Because Sega was not ready to have something really competitive at the time until like another year or year and a half later. So they wanted to do this standalone console. Actually, it never came out on the market in this shape. Because there was some opposition from the Sega American side, CTO called Miller, who actually said that, well, if you're not going to do something that's going to be very different from the MegaDrive, which is basically an improved version of the MegaDrive, why don't you make it into an extension slot, more like kind of peripheral? And that's what became actually the Sega 32X. He managed to convince them that it makes more sense to use the installed base and to build on that base to actually commercialize this at a lower price. And as the 3DO went on market in the US in '93, it wasn't very successful because it was priced very high. Progressively, they understood that the threat was kind of gone. And this was launched late on the market in '93 in the US, but soon after, Sega said, like, well, let's stop this shit, because anyway, this is not our future. This was just, in case something happened with 3DO, but nothing happened with 3DO, actually we are safe. And we can now focus on the actual real stuff, which was the Sega Saturn, that you can see here. This was a real 32-bit console that Sega of Japan was working on. And the thing that Sega didn't expect in the first place in '94 was that there would be another competitor in the race, Sony. And that was very unexpected because Sony was very new. There was no sign that they were going to enter this kind of market before. They had a collaboration going with Nintendo to make kind of CD drive before, but Nintendo, sorry guys, actually fucked them really bad and make them lose their face in a really bad way by breaking the contract and going with Philips instead the last minute without any agreement. And people at Sony were very angry at what Nintendo did to them. And there was a number of people, like Kutaragi-san was basically the head of the PlayStation project, was extremely angry at Nintendo and wanted to get his revenge in the market. And he did it. So he was an engineer, and actually what the genius thing in the PlayStation is that they didn't use the parts that were usually used for home consoles. They actually used a number of components that were coming from the graphics workstation that Sony was working on for the separate business. So they managed to kind of make lower cost parts from these workstations and to give the kind of similar kind of power to this PlayStation in order to compete at least on the 3D capabilities to be very strong in that field. Because that's where they saw the market would go in a couple of years. Sega management, when they saw this coming, they were very worried actually, because on the paper, the specification of the PlayStation were very appealing and looked to be very strong. And we don't exactly know what happened at the time, but we know that between the time there was the announcement from Sony and the time the Saturn was released, there was a change in the hardware. They actually went and added a second processor, a second CPU on the board. And it was only one SH2 before, became two SH2 in the end, within a matter of 6 months. So they had a very kind of last-minute redesign of the board to increase the power of the Saturn. And this kind of dual CPU board was not something completely new for Sega, because they were in the kind of arcade games business. And a number of the arcade games were actually using two CPUs. You have Afterburner 2 and Outrun were, for example, using two CPUs in their main boards. So they had some experience on how to make those, but programming this is something very different. And while they had some people who knew how to program this internally, if you were a home developer for other consoles, it was something that you had never seen before, and it would be very difficult to actually understand how to tap into that power. Nevertheless, they launched in December '94 with Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter was one of the first 3D fighting games. It was kind of very early at the time, but it was one of the first one like that. It was very popular in Japan. And they launched 1 week ahead of the Sony launch. And they were actually very successful on the market in Japan. In the first few months, they were actually selling more Saturns than they were selling PlayStation in Japan. So you have to imagine, it's 95, you just started selling the Saturn, selling very well in Japan. You're Nakayama-san. What do you want to do next? You want to conquer the US market. And what you want to do is you want to reapply what's working in the Japanese market into the US market. And you look at the timeline, and well, we plan to launch in September the Saturn, just before, like 1 week before the PlayStation from Sony. And the problem is that Sony in the US was a massive company, and they were going to put a lot of money and a lot of muscle behind that commercialization. They were going to have more than 12,000 selling points. They were going to have massive TV advertisements. They were going to have billboards everywhere. So you will not be able to live without seeing PlayStation around you in the US. And so the Saturn, they had no way. Sega was still a small company. They had no way they could compete on the advertising side. So the kind of only rational thing that Nakayama-san could see was that you have to launch earlier. You have to advance the launch of the Saturn like 6 months later, about 6 months later, or earlier. Sorry. And Tom Kalinske was actually against strategy because this would be done in secret, and this would probably piss off a number of their partners who would like to be aware of these kind of things, because the games that were supposed to be launched at the same time would not be ready like 5 months earlier. And he was also against the pricing that Nakayama-san asked him to make for this console. He was asked to price it at $399, while Tom wanted to sell it less than $300. And Tom really understood that in the US, the price point is extremely sensitive. There's really a barrier, and above that barrier, you just don't sell anymore. And the 3DO, we already seen that with Triple Kings. He sold the console at $700. That's very expensive with that, even more than $700 nowadays. And he didn't sell anything. So there was really a critical point here. The pricing was very important, but somehow Nakayama-san was also very aware that he didn't want to sell much cheaper. That's the way it was sold in Japan, because it was similar kind of pricing. So the announcement was actually happening at the first E3 in '95 in the US, Los Angeles. And Tom went on stage and he said, well, we were saying that we're going to launch the Saturn in September. Well, actually, it was a joke. It's already out. And you can go and grab it outside and have fun with Virtua Fighter after that. And it's $399. Problem is that he was the first to go for his keynote. Everybody was surprised, by the way. Nobody expected the launch of the Saturn to be at that time. So actually, for the surprise, they were actually very good. Sony was next in the keynote. Sony couldn't say, I'm going to launch tomorrow as well, because they were not ready anyway. They didn't expect that at all. But they had a number of boring presentations, like talking about specifications and technical demos and so on. And then they made Steve Race, the head of marketing, come on stage for a very short speech. $299. That was it. So they were going to play the pricing game against Saturn for the launch, even though they were launching later. And the problem is that was also very unexpected, because both consoles in Japan were priced pretty much at the same kind of pricing. There was some difference, but they were very much in the same range. And they were actually decreasing the price significantly for the US launch. And they had the advantage of the announcement versus Saturn and Sega. And they even have Michael Jackson come and play. Funny. So most gamers, actually, when they were faced with that choice, you get a Saturn now at $399, or in 6 months, or a couple of months, a PlayStation with probably more games at $100 less. Well, the choice is very clear. You don't buy the Saturn now. You wait probably, and you see what's going to be in a few months later. And that's what people did. They sold only about 100,000 of the Sega Saturn in the US between that time gap between the time it was announced and the time PlayStation came on the market. So it was a complete failure in terms of strategy. And even the launch game, you could clearly see the differences as well. Ridge Racer on the right, on PlayStation, on the left you have the Saturn version of Daytona USA. There was some gap in terms of how good they looked as well, and it didn't take very high IQ to understand that the PlayStation looked better, felt better, and Sony had the advantage, at least in communication. 96, after this disastrous holiday season in the US, Sega had to do something. And they wanted to come back in 96 with a lot of software innovation. Actually, lots of good games they wanted to bring to the market. And they actually did, but the problem is that in 96 there was somebody else coming, Nintendo. And all the media attention was going to Nintendo at that stage because they were the major player in the previous generation. So they were expecting to give a good fight against Sony at least, and at least Sega as well. And they had a number of good games for the system. They had Super Mario 64. They were pretty impressive at the time, and so on. So no matter how much Sega was trying to advertise their new games, it was still becoming kind of like the third competitor before Sony and the Nintendo. And Nintendo was launching already in the middle of the year, about June timeframe, and it was launching at even a lower price, $199. So what happened in that time range, both companies were fighting in pricing here, and then that one came even lower price. And that especially hurt Sega the most because Sega was an integrator company. They were buying chips from all over the place. They were not making their chips themselves. And they were just building them from other off-the-shelf available parts. While Sony was making their own chips, Nintendo, they had special arrangements as well in terms of pricing. And Sega basically was hurt a lot in terms of hardware costs. Especially they had 2 CPUs to pay for every Saturn they were selling, and it was very expensive. So they were selling at loss at $199 for sure. They were bleeding money at every minute they were selling. And you will see that later in their finances. Even though they had a number of very decent games, you have Virtua Fighter 2, which was the best looking fighting game at the time. There was nothing equivalent when it came out on PlayStation. Later you had, of course, Tekken 3 and Tekken 2 was decently looking, but at the time it was really the best. They had also Knights. There was one of the games from Nakasan, who created Sonic for the MegaDrive. And you also had a number of ports on multi-platform games. This is an example of Tomb Raider. You have PlayStation on the left, Saturn on the right, and again here it wasn't very much showing the advantage of having a Saturn because it's difficult to tell here, but you can kind of guess that it doesn't look as great. For the same kind of games, you would comparing both platforms. You actually have something that's looking actually worse on the Saturn. And problem as well is that these ports were actually coming later. Usually they were doing first the PlayStation version, and then later they would do the Saturn version when they had time. And in the case of Tomb Raider, something interesting here is Tomb Raider actually came first on the Saturn. But they didn't do any kind of announcement or any kind of big deal out of it. But when it came on the PlayStation, Sony took it and made it kind of media, thing. And it went on Wired, it went on newspapers, it became like a phenomenon, Lara Croft. It became associated with the Sony brand, and they actually used it to their advantage. And it kind of became really a Sony kind of character, somehow. And Sega completely missed that opportunity to do that at the time when it came out from the Saturn. And that's something they could have, helped their business. In that year also, Tom actually left the company, resigned, because he had strong differences, versus the Japanese management. He could not understand what they were doing, and he didn't want to work with them anymore. And he was replaced pretty soon by Bernie Stoller, who was actually an executive from Sony, and he was coming to actually help the Sega America branch. There was this game also, Sonic Extreme, that was made in America, and this game was supposed to be the new Sonic game for the Saturn. And Sonic was a very powerful character at the time. You only had good games with Sonic, not like now. So they were expecting to have something amazing on the Saturn with its capabilities. And they had been working on that game for a long time, and it was expected to release at the end of '96. But there was a lot of mess internally on how to design that game. They actually restarted the design of that game several times. And there were actually several teams competing in each other to try to kind of remake it. And lots of people actually burning out, trying to achieve, how to make this game in the first place. So in the end, it was delayed several times, and so on, and until it was finally canned because we just couldn't finish anymore. So unfortunately, it never came out. It has a kind of cult following nowadays, but it actually never saw the light of day. 1997 was pretty much the last year of the Saturn in the US. Bernie Stoller in the E3 said, okay, our future is not the Sega Saturn anymore. I want to be very clear with you guys. We don't care about the Saturn anymore. And he was already thinking about the next generation, which was Dreamcast. And I can't really blame him for that, even though he got lots of resentment from the Sega fans at the time. Because when he looked at the finances of Sega, the revenues, was currently going down the drain progressively. And it was very costly for them to maintain the Saturn in life. And well, my personal opinion is that they were already dead as a hardware maker by the time they finished the Saturn, because they had no way that they could finance the new hardware and a new distribution like they do with the Dreamcast. And you can see they were still in the red very much after that with the Dreamcast. They never came back in positive revenues. And then they finally stopped making console. And what happened in the end, you can't see here anymore, but like the Saturn basically sold relatively well in Japan. It's actually an exception for Sega. But sold almost nothing outside of Japan. And that's really a clear difference with what happened for the MegaDrive. MegaDrive was a failure in Japan, so they gave a lot of flexibility in the US on how they would market it. While I think what's unfortunate what happened in the Saturn is that it was successful in Japan. And the Japanese management thought that they should be, in charge for, bringing that business outside of them, outside of their territories. And they should have probably given more flexibility to Tom and other countries as well to develop their business the way they wanted. And because of number of reasons I mentioned, it was a clear failure. And they learned from that, but it was too late by the time the Dreamcast came out. And that's it.
Those last two on that's the PlayStation.
That's PlayStation and the Nintendo 64.
Okay.
So you can see that the Saturn was actually about the same size as the Nintendo 64 in Japan, in size. So it was still surviving until the late 90s in Japan.
Is it a good question?
Yeah, sure.
One thing that always bothered me, and this is like from the viewpoint of a 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old kid, is why did we just stop making it black? You know what I mean? It always seemed like the color like Nintendo white, PlayStation white. Like Sega just kept putting out black consoles over and over again. That sort of has a really bad connotation, at least in the American.
Well, actually, the first Japanese model was this color, which actually is it's pretty disgusting. But, it's just my taste, but they made the white one after that.
Yeah.
And but yeah, in the US they kept it black. I think it was part of the strategy to make it look more adult, I guess.
Like a VCR.
Yeah.
Oh, because it's mostly adults who are buying them.
No, but they wanted to appeal to more like mature audience.
Right.
So it was probably one of the ways they could differentiate themselves versus the other.
And it's easier to.
Yeah, right. For the kids, then yeah, right.
Well, Sega was trying to maintain like an edgy kind of persona, and I think black is probably much more edgy than white.
Even the MegaDrive was black, actually.
What's that?
The MegaDrive, the Genesis was black as well. So it was kind of continuity.
Right. But the thing that always got me is it's like I got my first Nintendo, my first game system because my mom bought it for me for Christmas. And then I got my second one because my mom bought it for me for Christmas. And then the third one because, and so it just seems like, maybe mom's buying them, you want to market to the moms a little bit too, I always thought. So
you prefer it pink?
What's that? No, not actually for the moms, but something they feel, because I know my mother, she would go to the store, and this would be her thinking process. So like, that one just looks kind of like evil. I'll make the one that's white and looks more wholesome and bring that to my house.
So did you get MegaDrive or Genesis?
I got Nintendo.
I got Nintendo.
Nintendo.
Because of that.
And then we had the PlayStation. Not because of that. We liked the I actually wanted the PlayStation for Wipeout. That was why. That was why I got that
Good
one.
choice.
Yeah.
Actually, Wipeout
Wipeout
came out on Saturn as well.
What's that?
Wipeout actually came out on Saturn as well.
I never heard about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about it, no.
It's not that bad.
It's very cheap now.
It's not that bad.
That's right.
Special price, 5,000 yen.
Oh, cheap. Yeah. I'll take it right now.
Actually, the Dreamcast is
cheaper on Yahoo auction.
Yeah.
Dreamcast, you can get a
It's
Dreamcast
very cheap.
with many games like for 5,000 yen. And it's still good.
That's good. That was a good system. Raise a taxi man. That was nice.
Any comments from Nintendo people?
No comments, right?
Older I am. Nintendo 64.
We have a new Super NES game where you can.
That's right. Yeah. So Thomas was just showing it before. There was this recent Super Nintendo game that actually came
Last month.
last month after being in development for actually
2 years.
Yeah.
I booked it 2 years ago
Yeah.
online. It's a Californian team called Super Fighter Team. And they make games for old consoles. And they made this game for Super NES.
When he says all consoles, he means all consoles.
Can I look at it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there's some old Dreamcast games still coming out.
Yeah, actually, it's still coming out.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Shooters and
Yeah, there's still a bunch coming out. So.
That's awesome.
Like this one, we got like the real
They are
case.
a lot easier to develop these days.
That's cool.
Kind of.
No, that's the thing that I'm sorry. That's the thing that I always
Back
wonder
then
about.
you
Because
had to,
you
like,
see in the life of the console,
graphic
developers
processors
get
that
better,
you
and the games that come out on the same hardware at the end of the cycle
Yeah.
are much better.
Why
Why don't you just keep going? Seriously.
Yeah, I was thinking because since there's two processors on the Saturn,
Right.
and people have been getting better at doing
Multiple
processor stuff. It should,
One thing I didn't mention, like the tools to actually program the Saturn were really bad at the time. I think internally it probably had better tools, but whatever they were giving as development kits to outside, I've been discussing a number of developers from the time. They were saying like it was crap. They had to restart the machine every time it was crashing. It was just a waste of time. And actually, most developers didn't program for both processors. They were actually just going for one, and that's it.
and we wasted the second.
That's right. Wasted the second one. And when people from Sega were saying it's very difficult to program using both processors, and I think only a few folks in Sega knew how to properly use them. That's why you had the best titles from Sega, actually.
Which hardware was more capable? Sony's
PlayStation.
Really?
I've heard that for 2D, for sprites,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was
the
best.
Saturn was better.
Yeah, because the Saturn still had the heritage of the arcade games hardware that basically was the life of Sega at the time. So they clearly had some additional processors for 2D operations.
Was it the same hardware?
No, it was not the same hardware, but they incorporated some of the design that they had in the other boards. Actually, it was more powerful than the earlier 2D boards that they had in the hardware in the arcade games.
The Saturn had more video RAM.
Right.
Than the PlayStation.
And you had also, I don't know if you're familiar with Saturn, but you had this slot here. It was a cartridge slot, not to play games, actually. It was an extension port. And you could put more RAM inside there, and you could actually do better 2D games. So you had like some almost like arcade perfect conversion of 2D fighter games thanks to this.
Have you heard of a game called the Donpachi?
Donpachi, of course, yeah.
The PlayStation had a lot of flicker because they couldn't push out all the sprites at the same time. Which the Saturn was almost perfect.
Yeah. The Saturn was perfect.
You sound bitter.
Love my Saturn.
So who had the PlayStation here? But just oh, you had a PlayStation. Okay.
I mean,
Who
at the time.
At the time. Who had the Saturn? Anybody?
I have it now.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. Nintendo 64.
Yes, we have markets.
I was Saturn.
Hey?
I was Saturn.
Oh.
I used a friend's one.
All right. Thank you for your time.